We're rolling.
We're rolling. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Ledger Town Council to order. Would you call the roll, Roxanne?
Mrs. Davis,
I am here.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Here.
Mrs. Ingles,
Here.
Mr. Malone,
Here.
Mr. Marshall,
Here.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Here.
Mr. Sebelia,
Here.
Mr. Washington.
Here.
9 here, 0 absent.
Okay, we have Superintendent Hartling. Do we have Mr. Bronner?
Good evening. Mike was called into work on a project, so I'll be covering the material.
Okay, so then you're up. So instead of Mr. Bronner, we have Superintendent Hartling, who is going to give the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 budget presentation.
And Chairman Davis, this is Chair Favory on the phone from the Board of Ed. So I can kick us off and then I'll turn it over to the superintendent. Sorry for the last minute program change this evening, but appreciate the opportunity as always. I know this is going on, I believe, my 5th year, I think, on the board and having the opportunity to present in front of Town Council the board's budget. Again, I want to thank all the town councilors and Councilor Solms from a finance committee perspective for the continued partnership as we continue to kick off the budget season work. Superintendent will go through the details at a very high level because we want to leave room for questions, but the overall ask from a budget standpoint from the board's perspective is a 1.45% increase, which equates to $482,549. The superintendent will go through the key changes, and you'll see there's really minimal key changes as we and the entire district team work through this year's budget cycle. The one thing I'll point out, and I know I mentioned this during the joint finance meeting that we had, of the 482 that is of our budget, 470,000 is strictly tied to contractual changes. And we always want to point that out because I think that's important to highlight, especially from an optics standpoint. But overall, very minimal change. Obviously, the superintendent will spend some time going through the details regarding just some of the personnel and staffing changes that are proposed within our budget. The other thing I'll point out too is the budget that is outlined is strictly related to the district needs. It's the aspects related to COVID response are not included in the budget because there's other funding mechanisms through grants and what comes from the government on those aspects of it. The other thing I'll point out too is one of the unknown factors that will continue to be challenged, especially as we round out this school season and then kick off the 2021-2022 year, is many unknown factors, especially from an enrollment perspective. The superintendent will hit upon the fact that from a kindergarten enrollment, we saw a pretty substantial decrease this year, which is not surprising given the pandemic. But we are anticipating to see that hit next year and see higher numbers from an enrollment standpoint. So there's some variability in just being able to plan ahead as we look at just our overall enrollment changes. So Superintendent Hartling, I know you're on the phone, but I'll turn it over to you. And as Town Council knows, the budget last week was adopted by the full board at our last board meeting. And the presentation is that you will be going through here is consistent to the presentation we provided the public during our board meeting. So Mr. Hartling, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Favory. And Mr. Favory knows this budget well enough. I think he could walk through the whole presentation. He stole a lot of my thunder. This is the Ledyard Public Schools Board of Education operating budget. And that's a really important distinction this year as we work through the pandemic. We are slated to receive by the federal government and then transferred through the state ESSR 2 funds, which we will be developing a plan for that will go to pandemic response. And the state and the federal government are very clear about those funds not being supplanted. So we are keeping those separate in the conversation, and I think that's very important note for Town Council. So our operational budget this year, and Roxanne's driving the slides, thank you. The 3 priorities continue to be very much aligned over the last few years. And that's focusing in on our strategic plan. That document is nearing the end of its life cycle, and we will begin the process of our next stage strategic plan. And I hope in this next cycle, despite the pandemic, that we have widespread community involvement and engagement so that we can continue to reflect the values and the goals of our community as a whole. We also want to maintain our high quality program and then continue our ongoing implementation of instructional interventions and improvements. And so the story in Ledyard is that we have many great things going on, and we have some really amazing programming pieces in place, but we also have some heavy lifts with regards to the opportunity gap in our community and making sure that we're putting interventions in place to support all students. And so, you know, my goal is 100% of our students meeting success and living out to their potential. So we're continuing that work as a school district. The increase, as you can see, is 1.45%. And, you know, I am very cognizant that every dollar directly impacts homeowners in the mill rate. And these are essential asks for the future and the current operating of Ledyard Public School. Kind of quick to break down. This slide hasn't changed much for y'all. Salary and wages continue to be a significant portion of our budget. And so again, as we talk about levers, really that's the main bucket. Everything else is you know, relatively small percentage of our overall cost. And then it's always important for me just to note that when you see benefits, we changed that moniker so it was clearly articulating non-healthcare benefits. That healthcare side is allocated to the board, to our per pupil, but carried on the town. The second year, this is the second year we've done this. We've done a district needs assessment with the administrators at each school to really kind of brainstorm through and prioritize those things that we wanted to make happen in the budget. And every year I have a lot of conversation with our team about prioritizing those, understanding there's two pieces to that. There's the financial implication, but there's also the organizational impact and our ability to support that. And so as we've invested in improvements in our organization, we've made sure we had the leadership in place, the coaching in place, the training in place, so that it's a successful intervention. I really don't like to throw good money after bad. And so we really do deliberately think through that. And there's some things on there that I would really love to implement, but we're not ready organizationally to do so. And you know, this reflects both a choice financially, but also organizationally. I want to be able to support every piece we put in place to make sure that it's a robust success for our students and it's good use of our funding. So key changes, you know, super high level. This is not every change in the budget, obviously. That would be, you know, prohibitive. But, you know, I always need to make sure that Councilman Davis has the savings related to retirements. There are 5 retirements in this budget that are accounted for. I would say that the picture of retirements continues to dwindle. We saw 2 years ago a large number of retirements that coincided with the closing of our beloved Ledyard Center School. We're beginning to get to the point where we're ending the annual cycle of retirements in the same robust way. And so we'll start seeing that drop to 1 or 2 a year. And so that's just the natural ebb and flow. Our staff is, you know, median age is in the 50s now, and that number continues to drop. So that will impact it. Our agreed upon contractual increases. So the contracts is agreed upon by the town council and the board. For this cycle is $470,000. We did increase $91,000 for enrollment with respect to required special education placements and tuition increases. And I've shared with the town council and the board on multiple occasions, I think it's a moral imperative that children with disabilities are in our schools. And so we work really hard to have children with disabilities in our schools with their classmates, with our community, with our students. I think it's a blessing for both our students with disabilities as it is with our other students. So But we are seeing some students who have significant needs that we're not able to service in the district, and this addresses for that. There's 26,000 for social, emotional, and behavior intervention, professional development. We continue to see the impacts of changing dynamics within homes in the schools, and we want to equip our staff members with the ability to respond to those in a loving, caring, and supportive way. We know the more we put those interventions in place early in a student's career, the more likely we are to see them reach success and feel fulfilled in their schools. And you know, I could use example after example of students who have benefited from this type of growing knowledge base that we have as a school district to work with our students. We've seen the district change, the poverty profile of our students, the number of students with disabilities, the number of students that are coming to us with challenges, and we want to respond to that. We want to make sure that every child gets that support, and we want to give our educators the tools to make that happen. We did add to this budget special education teacher related to the social emotional learning program for grades K2 at GFS. And I would say that the programs that Ms. Davis and the team has stood up regarding social emotional learning and our high needs programs have been significant benefits to our students, which is most important, but also have allowed us to mitigate outplacements in a way that really has been a beautiful thing for our children in our buildings, so that we're serving all of our students and not outplacing them. We've added a preschool educator, and that's related to enrollment. So to refresh the town council, Birth to 3 is a state program. We get notified the day a child turns 3. If that child has a disability, they're eligible for services, and we are looking at the projections based on what data we're getting from Birth to 3 and planning for that accordingly. I did do a comparison for the Board of Education relative to our preschool program staffing, and we would exceed the state allowed limits. So the state limits at 16, and we would exceed over 18 should we not have this position. So we'd have a legal issue, and this is right for kids. And then the last piece is continuing with our math interventionist rollout on the K5 level. For the town council's understanding, we have completely revamped our numeracy program 3.5, and we'll begin implementing K2. It's a significant lift, but more importantly, we're also, for the first time last year, thanks to the support of the Board of Education and Town Council, we began formalized math interventions, which is, quite frankly, should have been done a long time ago. And I'm really excited about the growth and positive work that Daisy and Stephanie have been doing. It's just been critical to our changing numeracy program and the work we're doing for children. And then there are pandemic related supplies in there, and that really fell under maintenance. We will always look for opportunities to use federal grants to take care of that, and we may see some additional dollars, but I thought it would be remiss if we didn't allocate some of those cleaning supplies appropriately, just in case. I don't like to count on the federal government coming through for some of those supplies. As we saw with the ESSER funds, they were very deliberate to talk about learning interventions and move away from supplies. So I wanted to make sure we were covered from that perspective. Per pupil, again, I pointed this out for the Board of Education. I think it's important for us to note as a community, per pupil expenditure, and I've seen some interesting comments about this over the past few years. Per pupil is every single expenditure related to the Board of Education. And that means the beautiful work that happened on the track and field project, the bonding for the schools, every penny. If the mayor says he spent money on a Q-tip, that gets allocated towards per pupil. That's just the calculation. And so I provide this just as kind of an overview comparative to state. And I would say that we've seen some impacts based on enrollment. And we'll go to that next slide, please, Roxanne. And then we just did a little regional comparison. And I know that that is not apples to apples, but I wanted to share where we are based on a per pupil funding model. what Ledyard is spending per student comparative to the area. And I think that's important to note because we're being incredibly efficient, but also I don't know where we want to be as a community with this number. And I think that's a legitimate dialogue that we need to open up a little bit more. And this number continues to press. 351 is a little bit of an eye chart here, sorry. That number reflects about $900 per student that we allocated towards a capital project, which was the Ledyard track and field. So, I mean, if we had removed that, that capital allocation, it just gives you a picture of where we are. And we have 2 schools baked in there, and I think it's worthy of a conversation, not for tonight, but down the road, about where we envision ourselves from a educational standpoint and around expenditures and the things that we're defraying, holding back on spending and et cetera. All recognizing that, there's a finite dollar amount out there. And so try to be respectful with that conversation, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that it's a real challenge point. And we've done that over the last few years, and we, I think, are being compared pretty regularly. And I'm proud of what our team is doing every day. But there are things that we may want to talk about as a community that we think are important and need to get factored in there. And it's a big conversation. Funding sources. So our community, Ledyard taxpayers continue to fund about 56.5% of our educational programming. We have had success growing our federal impact aid to about 4.5%. The state of Connecticut's portion is in there, and you can see where those funding sources come from. The Board of Education provides revenue estimates as a support to the town council for the difficult work that you need to do. And that next slide just lays out where we think those projections should be. I would just note ECS is in this budget still reflects the legislature's plan for ECS. The governor's plan held ECS flat. And so if the governor's plan for educational cost sharing were to go through, we would see that number move up to 11,492. It's getting pretty widespread legislative commentary. And so I don't know where ECS is going. I am very active in lobbying to ensure that Ledyard gets everything it can to support students, and we'll continue to update the town as we go. We did make adjustments in other categories based on trend and where we're seeing it. It's interesting, one note I just make is agricultural science is really, we've had a lot of conversations about enrollment. We're seeing a lot more Ledyard students participate in Ag-Sci, which is really cool, but that will change the tuition profile a little bit. And so we're watching that very closely, balancing the grant that comes in with the tuition and all of that, and we'll continue to monitor that. But I'm really excited that our 8th graders are opting to Ledyard High School and taking that great opportunity in the Ag-Sci program, because it's really remarkable. So enrollment is really a challenge. We did see about 60 students move to homeschool at some point in the course of this school year to what we believe is a response to the pandemic. And then we have seen a significant number, and the number fluctuates a little bit based on our estimates, but we think about 35 students opt out of kindergarten. So they didn't enroll their students in kindergarten. It's not compulsory. And so how we approach that next year is really we're using the data the best we can to make predictions based on what we think could happen. I don't even know how to say that right. And the team really spent a lot of time crunching numbers. We found a pretty decent accuracy rate, thank you, with the enrollment reports, the new enrollment reports that we've been getting. And this year was just thrown off by the pandemic, and everybody knows it. We're all running with it. We've got LMS and LHS projected enrollment. No real big stories there, although we're seeing the high school flatten out a little bit, and we'll see less swings in enrollment over the next few years at the secondary level. we are projected to grow about 6% at the elementary level. And some of that is conjecture based on new housing starts and what we're seeing with turnovers. They tend to be families that are starting out with elementary age children. So we'll monitor that very closely. This just gives you a little bit of a look at what our crystal ball is telling us with class size and where we are with it. And we'll continue to monitor this and flex. I always share, 3 years ago, I had like 35 students enroll in 3rd grade on the Gales Ferry side. It was the most unbelievable swing that we could have. It was just completely unpredictable. So enrollment is always tough, but we've started to develop some pretty good understandings of it. The real trick here will be how we swing first in kindergarten. So we're working very hard on kindergarten and 1st grade screening devices that will help us best place our littles when they come in to ensure they're on the right track for their matriculation through our district. And then the last slide is an overview, and of course I'm here for any questions or concerns or thoughts or ideas, and I know Mr. Favory and other members of the board are also on to support that.
Thank you. Any town councilors have questions at this time? Councilor Ingalls.
Good evening, everybody. So Superintendent Hartling, you mentioned, this is just really a curiosity. You mentioned that kindergarten enrollment is not compulsory. Is that an age? Is it not compulsory by age, or is it that, I don't remember what this.
I know what you're asking, and I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to like pull onto my homeschool brain. Like, I know, is it that in the state you don't need, school attendance is not compulsory until age 8? So part of what I'm asking really is, are you trying to keep an eye on, so these 35 students that were not enrolled in kindergarten, are you suspecting that they're just going to skip the year and try to move into 1st grade? Will they be screened for that? You're muted.
You're muted.
I literally muted myself. So perhaps Ms. Hogston can answer that question around the compulsory, if it's age or grade. What I can say is that we are just unsure. So we're developing a screening tool to support us in making the best decision for that child based on their entry point. So if they weren't with us with K, their parents had worked with them, or their family had worked with them and they want to go forward, we're going to place students based on that and that right move. Sure. And we've also examined several different models to try to honestly bob and weave with where our students are when they come to us. Even in K, I mean, we see students arrive with very, very different levels of skill and phonemic awareness and all of those different pieces. And so we're really in an unknown place, and we expect that we're going to have to be very flexible with our K and 1. We also need to be very aware of enrollment bubbles, because they can cause pretty significant shifting of teachers and grade levels. And I'm really working hard to keep people in a grade level so that they can develop a level of expertise. We did see data that said, when a teacher's new to a grade level, we see less performance for their students. That's, obviously if they're learning a grade level, we shouldn't expect that they're, so we're really working hard to kind of create that stability. So there's a lot of factors at play in that question. Ms. Hogston, did you want to answer on that compulsory side?
Sure. So students are eligible for kindergarten at a certain age. So if they turn 5 years old by January 1st, they can attend kindergarten. But to my knowledge, kindergarten is not a mandatory grade. So, right.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, so they could conceivably, so you use your screening tool, they could conceivably demonstrate that they're ready for 1st grade.
Absolutely.
And not have to attend kindergarten. Okay.
And that's the idea, because we want the students to be in the developmentally appropriate grade.
Sure.
And keep moving them forward. So, and I think that'll be the case.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good question. I got some research to do tonight. Thank you.
Any other counselors have a question? Questions? Mr. Psalms. You're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to find the unmute button, sorry. I just want to acknowledge Mr. Hartling's comment about spending on education per pupil. For years, I've wanted to show every year to the taxpayers what we spend on education in comparison to other towns. And the reason I want to do that is I want the taxpayers to see what a good deal, what a good value Ledyard is. If we just present a budget that says we're spending $15,500 plus per student, that's kind of eye-opening and shocking to many people. But if you see that we do that in comparison to other towns in the $16,000, $17,000, $18,000, $19,000 spend, that puts it in a different perspective. So I want taxpayers to see the value they're getting. I'm proud of the fact that we have excellent schools and that our kids do as well as they do for that dollar amount, because money doesn't automatically generate better schooling. And also, not spending $20,000 doesn't generate bad schooling. But at some point, we have to be aware that we are near the bottom and there is a potential risk there. So I just want to acknowledge your comments. And I think it's important that we pay attention to it, because we don't want to lose the quality of the education that we're getting. And I think it's important to prepare taxpayers with the value that they're getting and have been getting for the last decades of years. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I have refrained from using a term I really love, which is academic return on investment. And that's really the philosophy I use as we add things or look at programs, reallocations. It's really about that academic return on investment so that we're maximizing the opportunity for students with the dollars we have. I just don't use that term a lot because it sounds cold, but that's kind of how we've looked at, or is how we've looked at the allocation of resources in a very finite resource environment.
Do any other town councils have any questions? I do not see any. Bill, I was just going to comment that, you know, I know when we do our town meeting and our public hearing, we try to show that graph of spending. Unfortunately, nobody attends those meetings. I wish I had a way to fix that. I really wish there was a way to fix that. I thought that maybe we'd get better attendance because it was all being, done as an online kind of thing. And it didn't seem to help last year. So I try to keep pushing that. It's so easy to get the information now. It's just all there. But it's definitely frustrating. And if anybody knows any way to fix that, certainly share it with us, because I would love to see this whole screen filled up with little faces. No cats, Mr. Hartley, no cats, but lots of little faces. And so we could share this information with lots of people. And it's just, fortunately, we have, you provided us with outstanding budgets. I say outstanding, I mean budgets that, well, we haven't had a budget defeated in many, many years, and I commend you all for that. And because the years of the defeated budgets were not pretty years. They were kind of tore the town apart in some ways. So it's happy that we can move forward, and I do commend you all for that. Any other comments?
If I may, I wanted to just clarify, compulsory education in the state of Connecticut starts at 5, but with the homeschool reality, families don't have an obligation to notify us of homeschool. It's a courtesy. So I wanted to just fix that. It is compulsory from 5 to 18. So.
Very good. Yes, thank you. Okay, and with that, we will move on to residents and property owners. If anyone has anything they would like to speak to the council on at this point. I see Mr. Treaster has his hand raised.
Thank you. Real quick,
Your address, please.
Eric Treaster, 10 Huntington Way.
Thank you.
Real quick, because of COVID and this the nightmare created by it, and the fact that our new schools are all air conditioned, is there any dollars or efforts or planning for summer school to help make up for the lost learning that took place during COVID? And perhaps even if the parents paid a little extra for additional summer education, I was wondering if that's being discussed by the school board and what the plans are, and if there's money in the budget for those types of catch-up efforts during the summer, taking advantage of the fact that our new schools are air conditioned. Thank you.
Mr. Hartling, would you like to address that?
Absolutely happy to do so. That's a great question, Mr. Treaster. I appreciate it. We are doing kind of multi-layering this. And so this summer we will have some summer school opportunities, and I kind of quote that because we're going to try to re-envision it. One of the big concerns I have with those type of programs is that they tend not to address some of my students who need it the most. And so I can also tell you that we're looking at a lot of pieces for next year to really accelerate our students and make sure that we have it built in to our school day in a way that it benefits every child, not just the ones whose parents bring them to a summer school program or enroll them in a summer school program. So we're kind of multifaceting it, both with summer programming and each level's looking at a little different, high school, middle, and elementary. And then next year, we will be doing some pretty aggressive acceleration pieces at our elementary in particular to ensure we're meeting those core needs for our students. So we're setting them up for long-term academic success. So hope that answers your question, sir.
Thank you. Are there any other residents and property owners that wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, are there any commission or committees here? I do not see any. So I will move on to comments of town councilors. Any comments? Mr. Washington.
I just want to take an opportunity to clarify a statement from the last town council meeting. I talked about reimbursement as it relates to the Mashantucket and Pequot Tribal Nation children, which is part of the impact aid. And as Superintendent Hartling clearly showed, the intent was to understand that there is some money coming in, but it was not the intent to have people think that the cost of that impact aid is covering the cost for the students. It's clearly not. Okay, especially when you look at the pie chart, it was never the intent to give that illusion. The pie chart shows for the impact aid, it's 4.5% of a budget. That's when you look at the whole budget, it's really peanuts. It's helpful, but it probably pays for baby. And I'll ask Superintendent Hartling, maybe a third on a most likely to, if you get lucky, to maybe a half on for some of the students that aid is based off of. But it was never an intention for people to think that cost for students that are being covered through the impact aid is covering their tuition. That's just not happening. And I just wanted to clarify that statement.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. I will have Roxanne actually make a note in our minutes that will clarify that. Any other council comments? Anyone? Okay, I just wanted to mention to give a special thanks to Joe Tillman and the Public Works crew. I was serving during the storm that never ended, and Mr. Tillman worked. I understand he was at the Public Works garage for a good 48 hours, if not more. So I would really like to commend him and really the whole crew. I don't think people realize how small our Public Works department is. And, you know, I'm on a lot of different groups on Facebook, and every town complains about their roads. And I kind of chuckle because, you know, every town thinks their roads are the worst, but I would guess that our road crew was the smallest. I think we can say that without worrying about being too incorrect. So thank you to them, and also to Steve Maslin, who kept me apprised through the whole storm, accident by accident. And it was such a shock that night that it just kept snowing and snowing and snowing. And I'm online and I'm seeing roads being closed in Norwich. And it seemed like it was in our corridor, Preston, Ledyard, Norwich, Willimantic, whole roads being closed. It was really quite the disaster. So we were fortunate there wasn't anything totally very serious. And also wanted to thank, of course, our responders, and to Steve, I mentioned Steve, but also Jim Mann, who kept me apprised of the weather reports, which was always fun since I'm a bit of a weather weenie. So thank you. And Mayor, if you could just send my thanks to all of them. They did a great job.
I absolutely will.
Thank you. I would at this time entertain a motion to approve the following minutes and special meeting minutes of February 10th, regular meeting minutes of February 10th, executive session February 10th, with the one note, Roxanne. Is there a second, please?
Second, Councilor Dombrowski.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other comments or corrections? Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Malone,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Soms,
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. You have your communications list. I made no referrals since the last meeting, so we will move on to subcommittee liaison reports. Subcommittee and liaison reports. Admin.
The administration committee has not met since our last town's council meeting.
And Mary, I wanted to let the admin committee know that the person you had for the farmers market committee has passed. It turned out to be with her new job, with her job and her job responsibilities, a little much for her to be able to handle. With she had a new schedule as well. So we are still looking for a member of the farmers market committee.
Okay, thank you.
Community relations.
We have not met since the last meeting. Nothing to report.
Thank you. Finance.
Finance committee met on last night at 5 p.m. and we discussed last week at 5 p.m. and we discussed the ASTI grant, which is the Ag Science and Technology grant, Board of Education year-end surplus, and the Board of Ed capital non-recurring fund and capital improvement plan with the finance director, so that we could all have a better understanding and ensure that town state procedures are being followed. The committee continues to be interested in the ways we can strengthen our capital reserve funding process to ensure that VOAG funds are properly spent and accounted for, as well as anticipating and communicating future capital needs well in advance. We asked a lot of questions about our general fund and how money moves back and forth, and we'll have a little bit more on that this evening in the items that are already on the agenda, and that's my report.
Mr. Soms, for the public benefit of the public, could you mention our work sessions coming up?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. The Finance Committee will be meeting with a number of other counselors present, as well as all of the department heads and the mayor and the director of finance, to review the mayor's budget, which includes the budget that was just presented by the Board of Education. We have 3 work sessions. The first one is next Thursday, March 4th. There's another one on Monday, March 8th, and a final one on Thursday, March 11th. All of them are held at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they run until 5 p.m. We will be meeting in person with the department heads, and the meetings will also be available, just like this meeting is, online, so that people who are interested in the budget and how money is spent by the town, you can hear the actual discussion department by department, line by line. So thank you for reminding me. March 4th, 8th, and 11th, 1 p.m. in the afternoon until 5.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Soms? I'm kind of delighted we're going to do that. We have never videoed the workshops, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. I mean, really, no one has any excuse for not being apprised of the budget, and I see some of you smiling. But really, if somebody in June, if somebody in May says to me, well, I had no idea. I mean, it's kind of hard to say that. I mean, we're providing with a lot of opportunities to be up to date with this budget. So hopefully we can all encourage people to attend some of those meetings.
I hope so. It's pretty interesting.
Yep. Let's see, moving on to land use, Mr. Dombrowski.
Land use is not met. I have no report.
Okay. Other liaison reports. Mrs. Ingles.
Board of Ed. So I have 3 items. Obviously, we just heard the budget presentation. Second thing is we need to have a more of a conversation about the school projects and their punch list. I think we've heard some different perspectives on. We've heard that they're closing, they're wrapping up, and then we've heard that they're actually, the punch list is like 90 items deep. And so I'm not sure what the communication is between facilities and PMBC, but there's quite a lot that's left to finish up. And I do believe we'll be talking about that a little more later tonight as we discuss the item that's going to come up for finance. The third item from the Board of Ed is that the board voted last week 6-3 to instruct the superintendent to implement to phase in returning students to in-person learning full-time, and those details are being worked out. And that is my report.
Mrs. Ingles, Mr. Juskowitz was scheduled to speak. When was he scheduled? Was it tonight he was scheduled, Roxanne?
It was going to be tonight, but he's coming March 10th.
Okay, so we bumped him in order to do the Board of Ed budget presentation. So he will be coming, and it will be good to get his perspective as well.
Thank you.
Was there any other questions for Counselor Ingalls? Any other liaison reports? Mr. Soms?
The meeting last night was with WPCA, so forgive my confusion. They did meet last night, and they reviewed and discussed the monthly water operations report, in which 3 water main breaks were reported in the same month and repaired in the Highlands. So the questions about how the mains break, why do they break, and some of the reasons are just old pipes. The pipes in the Highlands are iron, but still iron breaks. It's lead joint construction rather than clamps or bolted connections, so the lead actually can fail. And most interestingly, that even though pipes are buried, hopefully 4 feet in the ground all the way through, the ground actually moves during temperature extremes. So Groton Utilities reported that none of the pipes that they have repaired in the Highlands were actually buried in sand, which they're supposed to be. So rocks and other debris can actually put pressure on the pipes, move them, wear them, and break them. So when they repair a main, they add a foot of sand over at least that section of the pipe when they refill the hole. Groton Utilities is also putting together a new water purchase agreement because their current one expired. This is not the water operations contract, it's not the billing contract, it's the actual agreement to purchase water. So that needs to be renewed. And that is separate from the price of water. Water rates are set by Groton Utilities separately. So we just need to continue the water purchase agreement. Also, we discussed, or the WPCA discussed the water and sewer budget with Ian Stammel, who attended the meeting, and that was very much appreciated. They had many questions of Mr. Stammel about the budget and how the forecasts are constructed. They made some minor adjustments to water purchase and electricity and approved both the water and the sewer budget. The WPCA has sole authority over the sewer budget, and they have forwarded on the water budget for town council approval. So we'll see that coming up probably at our next meeting. Groton Utilities has also revised the plans and specs for the Highland tank demolition, which have been delivered to the town planner, and past due receivables have decreased from December, possibly because the WPCA began charging penalties to customers who are late but did not set up a payment plan if they were impacted by the pandemic. And finally, the water treatment plant has hired new operators to replace those lost to other water systems for higher wages. And apparently we did that at a pretty good rate. That's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Soms? Okay, any other liaison reports? I just have a couple things on, I guess this would be under social services. March 24th, Ledyard will be holding another food giveaway. You've seen probably lots of communities giving the farms to families boxes out. Ours will be March 24th from 4 to 5:30 at the high school. Thank you to Wayne Donaldson and Mr. Hartling for helping to facilitate that. The last one we did a couple months back, we had over 500 people attend and it went relatively smoothly. So thank you for that. And then just that the Farmers Market Committee applications are coming in for vendors. And I have to say that I think Ledyard is the most popular farmers market for food trucks. They love us. We like to eat. There is no question. We just get, I mean, they're fighting over positions because we only want to have 4 food trucks there at a time. But in order so the competition isn't crazy, but they're coming in and we're happy to see that we are very popular. And for those that were wanting donuts, people kept asking for donuts. We have signed up Dude's Donuts. So you will get your donuts this year. Any other liaison reports? Okay, Mayor Allen.
Evening, everybody. And as much as Councilwoman Davis, Council Chairwoman Davis thanked Public Works and Steve Maslin, I would also thank you for what you did in my absence. And why we get storms when the mayor goes away, I don't know, but it's very consistent. So thank you for covering in my absence. It was greatly appreciated. And I did return a couple phone calls about the storm and complaints about the snow plowing. And after consulting with Steve Maslin, and the snow was coming down at a rate of 2 to 3 inches per hour, it would have equated to about 50 plow trucks having to be on the roads at any given time to actually keep up with that rate of snowfall. So generally people understood that it was kind of a surprise the way that storm whipped its tail around on us, but you got through and it is appreciated. Our salt stores got severely depleted from that storm. We have had a couple truckloads come in now to replenish because, as we all know, winter may not be over just because it was 50 today. And our large plow truck that you know that we lost in the previous storm has been repaired and is back in service. That was a huge help. I did manage to chair our COG meeting from sunny South Florida on the 17th. We had Senator Blumenthal on. We also had Deep Commissioner Dykes on and the Navy for a couple different things. All of the subjects were very interesting. Senator Blumenthal talking about the newest round of funding and how it would affect municipalities. So we're still watching to see where that's going to go. And Congressman Courtney has provided us some insight on that. Commissioner Dykes, they have completed a study for trash removal for the state of Connecticut, and it's becoming very difficult because our incinerators are aging, and there is now only one landfill that's open in the state of Connecticut. So they are looking actively at making some major changes. Some of those changes that they want to make were supported by the Council of Governments in our legislative agenda this year, which included things like revising the bottle bill from a nickel to a dime, adding things like liquor bottles and nips, or the mini bottles. And the other one is removing food scraps from the waste stream. That we all know that there's a substantial amount. I think it's about 22-23% of the tonnage in our waste stream is food scraps. So DEEP is looking for towns to do pilot programs for food to organic soils, and I think we have a great opportunity in Ledyard to do that. So I have let Commissioner Dykes know that please let us know, because I think that's something that we could probably do and do well up there. Let's see what else on that. Oh, I also had a huge thank you for Mohegan Sun. They have offered the big Barrett Jackson car auction tent as a drive-through mass vaccination site. So I believe that's going to be opening up first week of March. So big thank you to them for that. The firefighters radio grant was submitted, so we're waiting a response. We hope that 2021 starts off as well as 2020 ended for us, with going 6 for 6 on grants. So keep our fingers crossed on that. The governor did issue his 89th executive order. It extended a number of executive orders through April 19th of this year. I'm still awaiting guidance for the budget process, because a number of the items that were indicated in the executive orders regarding budget process did expire. So I reached out to his office. We're still awaiting word on that. This one of particular interest to people is that it does extend the eviction moratorium, but if tenants are 6 or more months behind in rent, they can now be evicted. So we need to make sure that people are aware that if you go over 6 months, you actually do risk eviction at this point. In terms of a COVID update, the last 2 weeks, we've only had 5 new confirmed cases in town, which I hope bodes well. I don't know whether people are testing less or not, but the prior month and a half, we were averaging about 30 new cases per week, and now we have 5 over 2 weeks. So hopefully that's viewed as good news. I am co-chairing the long-term disaster recovery meeting tomorrow, again through the COG. What we're looking for are what they're calling unmet needs. So things like senior shut-ins that have not had access to vaccinations, senior housing groups that don't have the ability to get to a vaccination site, and maybe the state through the emergency management team can get a vaccination site to them. So just keep your ears out for things that we don't want to slip through the cracks. So if you find something that might be slipping through the cracks, please let me know, and we can elevate that through the disaster recovery team and right up to the state. The state obviously is opening for vaccines 55 plus on Monday. I think that's great news. Ledgelight is actually doing a drive-through clinic this Sunday from noon to 3 p.m. That's at Waterford Public Works, which is over on Route 85 in Waterford. And the best way to sign up, they're still pushing for the 65 plus, but the best way to sign up right now ahead of that is to communicate with the Ledyard Senior Center or Ledgelight, and they will sign people up through their avenue as opposed to the clunky VAM system or anything else. So there are still openings for that. I did receive a petition from the Lantern Hill Valley Association. It was signed, excuse me, signed by about 500 people and businesses regarding the Lantern Hill Bridge, road bridge, as you know. And we are still working. Senator Austin has submitted for funding for replacement of the bridge. The alewife is now that the Whitford Pond Dam has been removed, the alewife fish can now swim up the Mystic River, up Whitford Brook, and into Long Pond. And so the hope is that in an effort to protect the alewife, we may see funding for that. But absent funding, we have to be prepared to work on the MOU with Stonington for the repairs. So I did receive a draft MOU from Stonington today. Public Works Director Maslin and I have started working on a counter proposal to them on that. But we need to be prepared to do that because the alternative is full closure by summertime. So we're hoping to kind of head that off. Working on a couple shared service opportunities in town with a couple pending retirements, which I will key everybody in on as we move forward. One of them, as you know, is Randy Dalton, who served for 28 years as the building official. So we're going to look and see if maybe it's a good opportunity for a regional effort. I also wanted to thank Governor Lamont. He heard the calls for a little bit of equity in the Pequot Fund allocations, and I thought I was going to have to lobby the legislature this year, but he has put in his budget $1.3 million of Pequot funding for the town of Ledyard, up from the $878,978. So barring any changes by the legislature to reduce that, we will be back on track which is where we were this current fiscal year and the prior fiscal year. The sewer feasibility study, we are doing a sewer feasibility study to run a sewer line from Ledyard Center either to the Ledyard High School and off to the facility down there at WPCA, or we have also included alternates. So alternate site designs could include a packaged wastewater treatment facility on site. So we have received 7 bids from that RFP, an excellent response. And Public Works Director Maslin, Planning Director Burdick, and I will be reviewing those tomorrow and hopefully selecting a bid in the very near future. The Nathan Lester House, as you may be aware, we have a lead paint issue in the caretaker's residence. We have now had it tested on more than one occasion. We've tried to not remediate it, but clean it. And the second go around, the lead levels are still elevated. So we need to do a full remediation in the caretaker's residence, not in the museum, but the caretaker's residence. And the initial quote that was received was over $20,000. So it looks like we're going to have to write an RFP and solicit bids and see where that goes. But it's going to be a costly effort that was unanticipated, but it's something that needs to be done and remedied there. And then the last item that I have is that the multi-use path, which is going to run from the Bill Library to Ledyard High School, is now in process. So if you're driving Colonel Ledyard Highway, you will start seeing surveying crews out there probably as early as tomorrow. And they are going to be doing survey work along that stretch. And the way it currently sits, the design firm that the town chose through the bid process has determined that the north side of the road is the best location for this path. So that would be on the same side as the Bill Library, running down in front of Fairway Drive, running down in front of Parks Place, down to the corner of Gallop Hill Road. It will probably also include a minor reconfiguration of Gallop Hill Road. So Gallop Hill Road intersection will come at more of a T, which will slow the traffic down coming down Colonel Ledyard Highway heading south, because the way it currently sits, people just kind of veer off onto Gallop Hill Road. And the idea is that by slowing those cars down, when pedestrians or cyclists cross closer to the high school, just slightly, basically just about equal with the level of the tennis courts on the Gallup Hill roadside, that it's just going to be a safer alternative than crossing Colonel Ledyard Highway. So you'll start seeing markups out there. You're going to start seeing stakes out there and flags. And if you hear from residents and from others that pass by, that's what's going on there. And that was also grant funded $1,987,000 that was received through the COG. So that was a grant funded project, and the town is anticipating that we will be clearing the snow and ice from that stretch. So unlike some towns in some situations, we're going to plan to do it as opposed to having the adjacent property owners handle that. So that's where we are. We got a lot going on, as we always do. The budget is coming along nicely. We're doing our final review tomorrow, and it will be delivered on Monday to the town clerk and to the town council by way of Roxanne. And that's all I have for you tonight. You're muted.
Linda, you're muted.
We each get one of those an evening, right, Mr. Washington? Does anybody have any questions for the mayor? Thank you, Mayor. Mrs. McGrattan.
Mayor, the senior commission met this afternoon, and Kent Harding was elected chairman. And he and the commission are very interested in trying to locate seniors who are shut-ins, and also to make sure that they all get vaccinated, trying to find mentors for them to get them. So he may be interested in helping you, or you may, ask for their help.
Okay, great. We have, what we did was we sent the direct link from Ledgelight to Parks and Rec Senior Center, okay. And their plan is to make themselves available so they will work to get people registered that way, because we understand that the phone system, though the state hired an additional 50 or 100 people, the phone system is still inundated and people are waiting a long time. So the online way is definitely the way to go. So the more we can get that note out there, and that communicating with the senior center, they can make it happen that way. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Any other questions for the mayor? Well, Mr. Munger, I guess I will let you ask a question.
It's not really a question. He was talking about the phones for the COVID.
Yes.
I have a phone number where I was on it in less than 5 minutes. My wife has an appointment Tuesday at Mohegan Sun. So I don't know if I got a different number from everybody else, but it was as easy as possible and took a lot less time than going online. So I can give it now if people want it.
Sure.
Or, okay, the number I called, let me get my phone here, was 1-833-275-9644. And I got right through. She asked all the normal COVID questions, like, did you go out of state? Did you do this? Did you do that? She asked, she says, you live in Gales Ferry? I said, yep. She says, where do you want to go? She had it Mohegan Sun. So like I said, within 5 minutes, my wife has her appointment.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that, Mr. Munger.
No problem.
Okay, any other questions for the mayor? Hearing none, we have no old business. Anyone like to amend the agenda under new business? Seeing none, admin, start with you.
Okay, I will make a motion to appoint Ms. Pamela C. Marr, Republican, 85 Stoddard's Wharf Road, to the Senior Citizens Commission for a 2-year term ending December the 9th, 2022, to fill a vacancy left by Ms. Peterson.
There's second. Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion?
Ms. Marr was recommended by members of the commission and also the Republican Town Committee.
Any questions? Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia,
Yes.
Mr. Psalm,
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
Mr. Malone.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item.
I make a motion to recommend the town council set a virtual public hearing on Wednesday, March 10th, 2020 at 6:15 PM to receive comments and recommendations regarding a proposed ordinance, an ordinance providing for property tax exemption for farm buildings in the town of Ledyard.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. Discussion. Oh, we're just setting a public hearing. Is that the?
Yes, yes.
Madam Chair, can I make a point?
Yes, that's.
Probably should set the date to be 2021 instead of 2020.
Oh, sorry.
I knew there was going to be discussion. Okay. Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia,
Yes.
Mr. Psalm,
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
Mr. Malone,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item.
This is Counselor Psalms. I move to authorize overexpenditure of public works budget winter operations accounts due to expected higher than budgeted demands.
Second, please.
Second.
Motion's
Thank
made
you.
and seconded. Discussion.
So at the time we acted on this, it was the night before the storm that never ended. And the budget calculations that Director Maslin had put together did not include that storm, but we knew it was coming. So we are at the point, he made the point that if all snow stopped right now, we'd be fine. But then we had that storm. Furthermore, this is not a specific dollar amount request. It's just the authorization to overspend the budget because we have to move the snow, we have to salt the roads. So as many of you know, Director Maslin keeps meticulous charts and graphs of budget expenses for winter operations. And he has multiple views and they all point in the wrong direction unless the snow just stops. The reason that he's asking for authorization to overspend his budget is because we're pretty careful with our budgets and he doesn't want to take money away from other budgeted items. So we don't have a dollar amount, but we know we have to do this. We've done it in the past years. This year, we did take a gamble. We were hoping for yet one more snowless winter. That didn't happen. But past experience tells us that when we authorize the director to overspend his budget, he spends just what needs to be spent on winter operations. And if he doesn't have to spend it, then we don't have to do anything and the budget remains intact.
Mr. Maslin, who is almost always here when we discuss any of his items, did ask me if he needed to be here tonight. And I told him I didn't think so because we have lived through these storms. So we certainly understand where he's coming from. So any questions?
Absolutely.
Yes, Mr. Washington.
Quick question. Is that, and this is really going to be directed toward the mayor because Steve Maslin isn't here. How bad is it relative to everything I've seen on television relative to getting salt and everybody having to go to New Haven to get salt? Where's Ledyard getting its salt from? Is it having to drive to New Haven all the way up to Westerly or out to Warwick or whatever to Providence to get salt?
We are, and Steve, Public Works Director Steve Maslin has always liked, for whatever reason, I believe it's the Morton salt better. So we do travel a distance to get that salt, but it has done well by us. So Yeah, that is true. And it's, we don't typically use the salt that comes from Driven from, used to be on the state pier. So yes, that is an issue right now. You either have Providence or New Haven to get the salt.
Well, just as a side note, being lucky enough to live on Spice Hill Road and the way my road is cleared all the time, there's like never really any snow. Keep getting whatever salt you're getting because it works great.
It does work well. Thank you.
I know during the storm that never ended that he messaged me that if it continued snowing, we were not going to have enough salt to make it through that storm. And I guess it turned out we did have enough, but there wasn't a lot extra if it had continued another day or so.
We had about 2 to 3 inches, a layer about 2 to 3 inches deep on the bottom of the salt shed. So very little.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Sebelia,
Yes.
Mr. Soms,
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
Mr. Malone,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item, Mr. Soms.
I move to authorize the Gales Ferry Fire Company to overexpend account 101-205-551-56700 vehicle equipment repairs by $13,000 and to transfer funds at year end to make the account whole.
Council Malone seconds.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion.
Thank you. So the ladder truck, which when we bought it was a demo, suffered a failed radiator. There were pinhole leaks in it. We received a significant discount on it because it was a demo, but the suspicion by the garage that removed and replaced the radiator said that it could be related to the fact that it was a demo and it traveled over the road probably at high speeds because it went long distances. Whatever the reason, the expense was about $8,000. And we have other expenses as well for repair and maintenance of fire equipment. But the big one was the ladder truck. It's a 2009. It was virtually new, given that it was a demo. It didn't spend the last 10 years going to fires, but it's been in service with us for several years. And our feeling is, or at least the finance committee's feeling is, it was still a really good deal because we saved about $300,000 because it was a demo. So the $8,000 expense is something that kind of goes with the territory. But as I say, it's other expenses have also piled up. So the fire company is making this request. And Chief Saccone, as he always is present with us this evening. So if we have additional questions, he can answer them too.
Just one comment, it is a 2015, so it's 6 years old. But as Councilor Summer says, that was one of the larger expenses. We're doing very well budget-wise until then. And also the pumper had a failure of some emission control devices, which is another $3,400. So combined the two, it's about $11,000. And any anticipated repairs now we cannot make because the fund is dwindled.
We did talk a little bit more about that because the letters EGR cooler came up and that brought up memories of other apparatus. So we asked, and the engine this is associated with is a Cummins diesel, which happens to be the same engine that we're having. Is it R13 or R13 replaced?
R11.
R11 at Ledyard Fire Company. So we're not anticipating we're going to have another engine problem, but still, as the chief says, we've had some issues.
Any other questions, or any questions, I should say? Hearing none, Roxanne, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Soms,
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
Mr. Malone,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Thank you as always, Chief Stacone
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
and Mr. Holyfield. Thank you. Next item.
I move to reallocate $2.1 million of the Gallup Hill School and Ledyard Middle School construction project authorizations of January 20, 2015 to pay project debt, with said funding to come from the following original allocations. Demolition of Ledyard Center School in the amount of $1.35 million, Gallup Hill School construction budget surplus in the amount of $337,500, and Ledyard Middle School construction budget surplus in the amount of $412,500.
Councilman Malone seconds.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion.
So this was disappointing. We know that the school projects have dragged on. The good news has been that they both came in under budget, but this was a long discussion at the Finance Committee because, as it turns out, when you have delays in school projects or any building project, you have borrowed money to pay for it and you're paying interest. This project was supposed to last 2 years. It ended up taking 6 years, and we're still working on the punch list. So we incurred debt that we did not plan to. If I recall correctly, I have to go back and look at my notes. I think the original debt forecast was about $235,000, and now we're looking at $2.1 million. We did receive about $2 million in, I'm going to call them premiums, when we published the bands for the short-term notes. And these premiums are paid by the bonding companies to encourage you to use their debt instead of another company's debt interest instrument. But that $2 million did not go to the project. It went to the high school track. So we are now planning to take the money that we saved by not demolishing Ledyard Center School and the money from the surplus or the underruns in the budget of the two school projects to pay for the extra debt cost. Disappointing, but we've had discussions in the past about the fact that there are a number of things that are still remaining to be fixed in both schools, but rather than continue to fight over this, which delays the project and causes our interest expenses to continue to go up, we've got to close this gap and get the project closed out. We're also waiting for the state to complete their audit of the project. And if we don't complete the project, in other words, close the project, they can't complete their audit. So that takes potentially another 6 months. So big disappointment all around, not the way we had intended for this project to work out, but this is what's happened. So I'll answer questions as I can.
Are there any questions? Hearing none. Roxanne, would you call the roll?
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
Mr. Malone,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Sebelia,
Yes.
Mr. Spahn.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion
Second.
and seconded. This meeting is adjourned without exception. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, good night, all.
Good night.
everyone.
Everybody.
Have a good night,
Good night.
everybody.
Night.
Good night, all.
Bye.